I te tuatahi me mihi ka tika kia koe, Laura. Nei rā te mihi uruhau kia koe, nau I whakatuwhera I te hui nei. Kei te mihi hoki māua ki ngā tangata I whakarite tēnei hui. Ngā mihi nunui kia koutou. Ko ai tēnei e kōrero ana, ko maunga haumi tōku maunga, ko waipawa tōku awa, ko horauta tōku waka, ko te aitanga māhaki me Ngāti Parau ōku iwi, ko te whānau taupara tōku hapu, ko takipu tōku marae, ko Tara McAllister ahau.
Nisa mbulawanaka te whare ko via moana, te moana, ko wainimala, te awa, ko neta siri, te iwi, ko ngona ne dolo, te hapu, ko Sereana, Naepi toku ingoa. Vanaka vakalevu for the invitation to share today. It is not often that Tara and I are asked to share about what we do, how we got here, and why we continue to talk about racism in our higher education and research sectors. We carry many identities with us as we go about our everyday lives. My academic identity is that of a sociologist who uses critical university studies to engage with the many different ways that we both experience the university and how the university responds to us. My other identity is that of a mum. I have 2 little girls, and I want to create a world that embraces all that they are. The photo from that first slide is from when Tara and I first met in person. It is one of the few times that my identity as an academic and as a mum have coexisted without tension. What you can't see in that photo is that we are both hapu, our youngest of 5 months apart. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would be regularly collaborating with a freshwater scientist, I would have thought it was a possibility, but not something I would actively pursue. If you had told me I would be collaborating weekly with a fierce Indigenous academic mama who wanted change, I would have signed any piece of paper to make that happen.
I think that as scientists and academics and communicators, we don't often talk enough about who we are, where we come from, and how that shapes our positionality and how we conduct research. I am a Māori woman. I belong to the iwi of Te Aitanga Māhaki. I'm a mother, partner, sister, daughter, cousin, and auntie. I'm an academic who is unfazed by stirring up the sand, and my scholarship is driven by thinking about what my legacy is. So the story about our collaboration began with our Wise Up My Professor Māori and Pacifica papers. As my PhD journey neared the end, I started to wonder about the numbers of Māori academics. I wondered if other Māori students go through their entire tertiary education without being taught by people who look like them, think like them, and who have shared values. I eventually found some data, and I knew of Moana and Joanna through Twitter, so I cold emailed them and asked them if they'd like to write a paper together. At that stage, I knew a lot about rivers and not much about racism. So it was really important to me to work collaboratively with people who are much smarter than me, but also with people who have expertise in the field of Māori education. We looked at the data from Pacific academics, and we knew that our whanaunga were even more underrepresented in the academy. But we were also cognizant that this wasn't our story as Māori to tell. And we then came up with the idea of finding a Pacific academic and giving them the data to write a sister paper. And I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, but I seriously can't imagine my life without having the absolute privilege of learning from and growing with Sereana.
For me, this has also been a life-changing relationship. I entered because I heard Joanna give one of her amazing keynotes at the Oceanic Comparative International Education Society during one of my visits home. Joanna quoted Tara's figures, and I was livid, so I do what we all do when we're angry and tweet about it. And Joanna had heard me speak at Nāpi conference a couple of weeks ago on Pacific women's experiences in the university, so she connected us both. We connected via email on the 27th of February 2019. As I reread our emails while I was preparing for this talk, I realized that even then we were talking about academia and being mums. We're 3 emails into our relationship and sharing stories about babies, returning to work, and whānau, then a line here and there about the data. Sometimes I talk about Tara as an academic soulmate, and I mean that because I can be me, and when I work with her. And she also challenges me to try new things like numbers. And I truly cannot imagine what my scholarship or being an academic mama would look like without her. What you might notice in these photos is that the four of us are never together in them. We have yet to all meet in person together. And if we had been able to join in person for this talk, it would have been the 5th time that Tara and I were in the same room together. Despite this, the collective has been an affirming space where our shared values mean that despite us never being in the same room all at the same time, we've managed to answer calls at 9 p.m, we've celebrated births, we've mourned together, we've uplifted each other, and we've started some pretty decent national arguments when we were angry at the racism and inequity in our sector. These are all the people that we work with in our research. They are the community that makes our work possible. From the fierce Professor Joanna Kidman, to the amazing Associate Professor Reremo Anathiroa, Dr. Leilani Walker, Dr. Patrick Thompson, Dr. Marcia Lennon Young, our mathematician wizard, Dr. Jessica Kua, Olivia Rowley, Elizabeth Wilson, Dr. Tomasai Lausualai, Dr. Dan Hikiroa, and Anna McAllister.
Our Why Is It My Professor Māori and Pacific papers did not tell us anything we already didn't know. No Māori or Pacific academics were surprised by this data. We have been sharing our stories of racism since we first entered the university system, and those stories have often been dismissed and ignored. But what these papers did do was provide solid evidence that Māori and Pacific academics were underrepresented in New Zealand universities. Clear quantitative evidence is hard for institutions to ignore. This data showed that, we've got 9 years of data now, and it showed that the percentage of Māori academics has lingered between 5 and 6%, and not much has changed over an extended period of time.
Not a lot has changed for Pacific over the years either. In fact, in 2020, Pacific academics got up to our 2015 high of just 2%.
Not only did this data tell us that Māori and Pacific academics were underrepresented, but it also told us that the inequities widen as you go up in the academic hierarchy. So in 2018, 73% of professors were Pākehā, 3% of professors were Māori, less than 0.5% of professors were Pacific, 6% of professors were Asian, and there were 5% of professors in the other category. And in terms of real numbers, this means that there were 40 Māori professors employed across our 8 universities, 5 Pacific professors, and 955 Pākehā professors.
The pipeline is fundamentally broken. We can see here at every level, Māori and Pacific are not served well. What does it mean to have a system where for every 1 Pākehā professor, there are 95 undergraduates? For every 1 Māori professor, there are 398 Māori undergraduates. And for every 1 Pasifika professor, there are 1,829 undergraduates. It means that Māori and Pasifika professors are carrying an extra labour burden. They are expected to be the voice at the table for so many people. They are expected to advocate for more people, to supervise more students, and we cannot continue to complain or expect Māori and Pacific professors to be all things to all people, whilst also expecting them to say no to service roles and protect their research time. Our value base simply means that we will write those reference letters, sit on that panel, email the struggling undergraduate, practice a presentation with an ECR, and instead what we actually need is more Māori and Pacific professors to share this load.
So we've talked a lot about academics really broadly, but what about Māoris in the science departments at our universities? So this graph shows the percentage of FTEs that belong to Māori in one particular university. On the x-axis, we have the year from 2008 to 2018. The black bars represent the percentage of FTEs that belong to Māori across the entire university. And the purple bars represent the percentage in the science departments. So what this graph shows is that there are always less Māori in science departments compared to across the entire university.
So why are there so few Māori and Pacific scientists? Well, our universities and research sector are creations of society. So everything, every policy, every person is there because another person somewhere at some point in time has decided that the thing, the policy, or the person fits the value base of the university. We have higher education and research sectors that have been built and maintained with very specific values that don't necessarily reflect Māori and Pacific values. So it makes sense that Māori and Pacific communities are underserved and undervalued when the system was never built for us anyway. And we see this in what we choose to name funds. When we name a fund after an individual, we are saying we value that individual, what they have done, who they are, and the values they espouse. In naming funds, we tell others, such as Māori and Pacific, what values we don't care about. University values such as academic freedom have been and continue to be used to perpetuate racism. The idea being, if it is an intellectual discussion, then it is somehow void of values and biases. Academic freedom is a privilege that is meant to be informed with robust research, not reckons. Who we choose to determine what excellence looks like matters. We know that funding boards have a bias, so when we select people whose values differ from Māori and Pacific values, they will select excellence that looks like their own values. The recent Fijian Fellowship disrupted this with a lottery attached to an excellence measure. These things contribute to feelings of isolation for Māori and Pacific scientists, who are often the only one in their field. Being the only one in your field leads to extra labour, as in an effort to rebalance the scales, we ask, we being the university, or the research institution, the only Māori or Pacific scientists to sit on panels, mentor the Māori and Pacific students in ECRs, provide feedback on grants, build relationships with mana whenua and Pacific communities, teach the stage 1 course so that people can see a brown face, and sometimes to be nice to the racist guy in the department because it's upsetting the faculty for them to be called out. This excess labour and isolation contributes to burnout. We cannot just focus on recruitment, we also need to think about retention in the system. So, in summary, 4 out of 10 Māori students will complete their degree. 3 out of 10 Pacific students will complete their degree. 8 out of 10 professors are Pākehā men. 6% of academics are Māori. 2% of academics are Pacific. Māori and Pacific experience a significant pay gap in our universities. And Māori and Pacific are also less likely to be promoted to professor, even when you control for age, PBRF score, and fields. Our collective of wahine toa have mapped the lack of Māori and Pacific academics, scientists, students, and pay gaps. Our mapping has driven national conversations, featured in research sector changes, and it is our shared values that will continue to push our sectors to do better and deliver on their glossy brochure promises.
To us, manaakitanga means being kind, generous, respectful, supportive, and caring. We incorporate manaakitanga into our work through ensuring that we bring as many people as we can along with us. This is evidenced in our ever-expanding list of people who we write with. We ensure that junior scholars and those who need to further their own career are in the right authorship spots. Others outside of our collective have shown us manaakitanga through volunteering their time and resources to advance causes like organising the names of over 7,000 academics and community members for an open letter against racism at Waikato University. Many people think of that utu is revenge, but utu is also about balance. We step in and out at different moments, depending on where we're at professionally and personally. We recognise that we all have important things outside of work that must take priority, and work collectively around life's piki, me ngā heke, the ups and downs. So when someone has had prolonged interrupted sleep due to babies waking up, we see that and we pick things up so others can rest and recover. One really important way that we show reciprocity is sending surprise food parcels. Whether it's cupcakes, cookies, lollies, or entire massive cakes, we uplift each other when we're feeling low or helpless, and also celebrate the small wins we sometimes experience while fighting racism.
For us, whanaungatanga is relational and intergenerational. It is about how we see our work as lasting beyond our lifetimes and as a continuation of the vision of those who came before us. It is also about how we care for each other in this work. It's not always easy work, but you'll be surprised what a box of candy delivered can do to lift not just our spirit, but also our families who often have to deal with us when we're stressed or dealing with the fallout from the work we do. My daughters love Tara's boxes. So when you think about it, our collaboration may not be that unexpected. Yes, it's unexpected when you think along the lines of disciplinary boundaries. How would a sociologist or a freshwater scientist even meet? But when you think about it from a value base, of course, one strong wahine toa, Professor Joanna Kidman, thought it made sense to introduce us both. She had been in spaces and heard us both ranting about the same thing. She knew that we held the same value sets and wanted the same sector change. Professor Joanna Kidman did what anyone who has a basis of manaakitanga, utu, and whanaungatanga would do. She introduced us.
These values speak to our vision of research and higher education sectors that value Māori and Pacific people, knowledges, and communities. Today, we're focusing on communication, but what we really want you to understand is that communication is such a small part of our overall vision. We are about change, but we invite others to come along with us in collective action. We don't just write papers, we write letters, we write emails, we support others, we create and maintain collectives, we speak to MPs, we amplify others' works, we start conversations. Ultimately, we work really hard behind the scenes with a toddler in tow and a pepe on our lap in order to create moments that will lead to change that will benefit not only our little ones, but everyone's mokopuna.
And a key part of creating moments is communicating a vision and bringing others with you. When we publish papers that bring attention to our sectors and equities, we know that we need to convince the public that this matters so that they put pressure on the power holders. This means a robust social media plan, media engagement, and consideration of our whole team. I'm covering off the social media plan, but let's be honest, this is Tara. Tara is amazing at how she uses social media to amplify not just her voice, but others. The tweet threads that get shared are agonized over. We have Google Docs open with threads that connect to threads, and we DM each other to say, okay, it's dropped. You can connect your thread to my thread now. It is orchestrated behind the scenes. My family know when a paper is dropped. They know I'll spend the day engaging with people and making sure that people feel heard, see the work, and can access it. For us, the key to social media is preparation and engagement. The main goal behind sharing our work on social media is amplifying a simple message and accessible knowledge based on research. It brings our research to the attention of the people who hold power in our sectors.
Working with the Science Media Centre has been absolutely fundamental in our success of getting our work out and into the public sphere. We often send them early versions of our papers and work with them to maximise media interest. So massive shout out to the folks at the Science Media Centre. They have trained us in their awesome science communication workshops, but have also helped us with expert reactions, which massively increase the media engagement with our work. We have also found that building relationships with people within the media has been extremely helpful. So as well as tweeting directly to John Campbell, Susie Wiles introduced us to the producers of Breakfast and RNZ's 9 to Noon when we were at our initial Why Is It My Professor Māori and Pacific papers. And those relationships have endured. So now when we have papers come out, we'll directly reach out to journalists and producers. We usually do our media releases through the Science Media Centre's expert reactions and not with universities. This is probably related to the fact that when we first published our we were first publishing our Why Isn't My Professor Māori and Pacifica papers, we reached out to our institutional media team, and they suggested that we might not get that much media interest. So we had a good laugh after we appeared on breakfast TV. And this is a really important consideration for those of you who work with Māori and Pacific researchers. We are relational and we remember. A really important consideration for us when we're making a media plan is what is everyone's capacity to engage with media and who wants to engage with media. For some people, it's not really their thing, but other people are super keen to get in front of the screen or behind a microphone. And an example of how our media strategy has maximised attention to our work is this paper, Underrepresented and Overlooked, Māori and Pacifica Scientists in Aotearoa New Zealand's University and Crown Research Institutes. So when this paper was published, I had a three-month-old baby and was technically still on maternity leave. So we weren't keen to do lots of media and we were quite targeted in our approach. We reached out beforehand to a Pacific journalist and gave them the scoop before the paper came out, so they already had something pre-written. We spread the interviews out amongst our team. Sereana and I did breakfast while our partners looked after our babies. We did interviews on RNZ. Leilani gave an interview on Afternoons with Jesse Mulligan. And on the day as the request came in from journalists, we divided them up according to who had capacity and who wanted to speak. Collectively, we gave 2 interviews on TV, several radio interviews, were quoted in 13 online media articles and in 9 newspapers. Because of our media engagement, this paper has a super high altmetric score. It's one of the highest scoring papers published in the New Zealand Journal of the Royal Society and is in the top 5% of all research outputs scored by altmetrics. Getting our research findings out to lots of different people through utilising media and social media platforms really amplifies our messages and starts key conversations, which eventually lead to change.
We're always thinking of different ways to tell the same story, and part of this means recognising our very obvious limits. Increasingly, we work with artists to help us convey our messages, because as you can see in that first image, a sociologist should never do the artwork. We have worked with artists in 3 different ways. The first was in creating a map on the left. We worked with McAllister, who transformed my very basic map drawn with my child's felt tip pens into the map we used in the Pakaru Pipeline article in 2019. The second way is with Taylor, who did the Aunties Ethics panel. They sat with us while we held a wānanga about the work, capturing our ideas and thoughts. And the third is with artists like Mark Kanoko, who captured the hyper-surveillance of Pacific women by reading our work and then capturing what stands out to them. And this was, I met Mark through the Science Media Centre and Spin-Offs Drawing for Science project. So for us, artists have proven to be a really powerful way to tell the same stories in a different way. And to be honest, if you're Indigenous or racialized woman talking about racism publicly, there's always going to be a backlash. And if you just happen to be intelligent and have a good argument, the backlash gets pretty bad. We've had people threaten to come to our workplaces, send complaints to the HR team and our line managers, the alumni office, send us emails, call us, and the Facebook comments are just trash. But as the Pacific women in my research have told me, our communities ground us. They are the cloak that wraps around us when we need comfort or strength. And it is in this collective of wahine toa that I have sat on the office floor in my pajamas at 9:30 at night, reflecting and having talanoa about how to keep ourselves safe while creating a safe place for our babies, our students, and those we are yet to meet. Tara and I could be an unexpected collaboration. Sometimes I think it's a great start to a joke. A freshwater scientist and a sociologist walk into a lecture theatre. But the reality is, if you change it slightly to 2 Indigenous academic mamas walk into a lecture theatre, you know it is going to end with a slight raise of an eyebrow and a nod to each other as they take the panel seats and begin to weave a narrative of numbers and stories to change how we think about higher education and research.
ngā mihi mai oha kia kōrua mō tō kōrero, tō kōrero kia mātou, kia tātou. Thank you so much. It was a fantastic presentation and talk. And yes, many people have commented in the chat. It is very sobering to see that, and it's much needed research has been done, and yeah, the way that you have communicated it as well across all different types of media has been exceptional, and I'm very, very happy to have had you give us the insider's look on how you did that. So we have some questions. So yeah, so you answered one of them. Which one was like, does it include the wharewaanga? They don't include that, but I think that's I believe. Do you have any further comments on that? It's mostly Māori-led anyway, or?
Yeah, so part of that is when you think about institutions and their value bases and how they were formed. So the reason we don't include wānanga is that the value base is completely different. So when we're critiquing universities, we're critiquing a value base that created the institution. In saying that, we definitely need some research into wānangas and into our wider polytechnic services. I think we might have lost Tara again.
I'm back. I just popped back in, sorry. So I didn't quite hear what you said, but yeah, wānanga are just completely different kettle of fish. You know, they're places where Māori values are ingrained very deeply in every single decision that is made. So it's just kind of apples and oranges, really. And of course, they have a very high percentage of Māori staff compared to university. So that's why we usually keep them separate and focus.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have some other questions coming in. One from Gianna. I would love to see us start including Moriori alongside Māori and Pacific people in our discussions of inclusivity. Moriori are one of the two distinct Indigenous cultures of Aotearoa, yet Indigenous to most. Do you have any comments around that?
Yeah, I mean, I would totally tautoko the inclusion of other people. We're really limited in the data that we get because it's data that the universities have collected themselves. So there are often really limited options for ethnicity, genders, and so forth. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen about how we collect data and what data is collected, because it does limit the conversations that we can have when certain people aren't properly captured within the data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also it's hard because you have different groups within Pacific as well. So how far do you go with Tongan versus Samoan? Or yes. We have another question as well, which is a more personal one from Georgia. Says, you both know that I'm a big fan of your work. Do you have any handy tips for keeping all of these parts of your life organised? And how to balance whānau, 9-to-5 work, volunteer work, and self-care?
You want to tell everyone how organised we were this morning, Sereana?
Yes, I will. So we were finishing this presentation 10 minutes before we went on, not because we didn't start. We started this about 2 weeks ago, but my family had to go to Rotorua to see my grandmother, internet cut off, children, we need to remember to feed ourselves. There's been some other researchy stuff happening in the background that has had to be prioritised. So the answer to that is I think we're really good at fronting being organised, but anyone who has a bit of a look into our life will see just how much our families pick up for us and just how much how much our families pick up, how much we sometimes drop the ball. I think we have what's the paper that we've been working on for 2 years? It's in Google Docs, precarity. So a precarity paper would be great right now, given all the conversations that are happening, but we just haven't got to it. So I think the only advice I can give is not very good because we have to-do lists that never get finished. Yeah, I don't know.
I think we have those to-do lists because because we recognise that when we might need self-care or we need to prioritise our whānau, that we just drop out and then we come back in when we can. So that's why our to-do list is kind of never ends, but we are prioritising ourselves. You know, I think that there's only so much one person can do. So one thing that we're definitely working on is, can everyone hear me? Everyone's frozen.
Yeah, we can hear you. You're frozen in a wonderful position.
Yay, that's great. I think I'm
we lost Tara. I think what Tara was going to say is that we tend to, it was the bit that we talked about in the presentation, right? We're really aware of each other's limitations. And I know when Tara hasn't had enough sleep, she knows when I haven't had enough sleep. And we care for each other in that way.
Yeah, and it is hard to balance. I've got a 10-month-old myself, and you might hear in the background. Who knows? She's there. My partner's looking after her, so yeah, I know that very well. So we have another question from Charlotte Shunde around educational and scholarship and funds. So iwi post-treaty settlements, do you have data to show the impact that these might be having in, or have had in, supporting more Māori students or academics through these institutions?
I think, so we haven't done that analysis, but we can do it, right? So that's about bringing two different sets of data together. So you need to bring together the treaty settlement dates for the different iwis and different hapu, and then you need to look, that would be quite a complicated one that I can't, the only reason I'm answering this question is it looks like we've lost Tara again, otherwise this is not me. So I think it's one of the things that we've noticed with bringing this data to the surface is that people want more data, and so we encourage people to go out and collect that data and tell those stories, because we fundamentally know these things. It's just that when we use the numbers that other people listen to us.
That's great. Yeah, good to do that. So we still have some questions coming through. So from Jenna, she says she missed the very beginning, so this may have been addressed already, but such a powerful presentation. I would like to know if you have given this presentation to other groups, and if not, do you have plans to? And she said she encourages you to take it on the road to speak. So that's an idea too, that was great.
So a little secret, if you ever want Tara and I to speak, just offer to have us in the same room together. So we don't get to see each other very often. So when we get an invitation for both of us to talk and spend some time together, we mostly will pretty much say yes. And so, yeah, this is the first time we've given this particular talk together, but I'm hoping that in the future we'll be able to do it more often. Thank you.
And I think I'm just checking whether we've got any more questions. It's hard to keep track of the chat. Do you log? So there's a question from Daisha. Do you log all of the extra work that you do in this space, such as helping people, translating video, helping staff like Mihi, supporting vision mātauranga initiatives for when other staff don't know where to start, etc., etc.? Do you like those?
No, but I know that there are members of our collective who do, who literally start a timer. I think a really interesting project would be getting academics to trace what they do with their days. I always think that my salary is good, and then my husband reminds me that I'm working till 10 o'clock at night, so I can't be that good. But I do think those are things to think about, is how much time are we spending on service when we're contracted to do point 4 research if you're an academic, and point 4 teaching. It's hard though to think about it in that way, I think. If a Pacific student emails me, or a Māori student or a Māori ECR emails Tara, the answer is yes, like no matter what. And I think that's because of how others have fed us to the position that we're in. I'm really missing my buddy right now, but
yeah. Phoebe has a question for you as well. Kia ora e korua, what advice can you give to educators working with young Māori and specific Pacifica people?
I would look at Ako Aotearoa to start with. So Ako Aotearoa has a lot of collections of work that it's Māori and Pacific researchers have spoken to Māori and Pacific students for different ways to support their success, and they look at wānanga, they look at universities, they look at politics, so they look across the board. And then the number one tip that I usually give people is just to know them. Know young Māori and Pasifika. If you know them, you remember their families, you remember all of those things. Thank you, Georgia. Then that can go a long way because you're aware of what they need. Oh, I was back, but can't speak or turn the mic on.
I'll just see if I can turn her on. Maybe Emma can try and turn her on. So Emma is acting as a support, so she's going through most of the questions and helping to deal with technical issues. Perhaps she's not technical, so Otago, University of Otago Zoom is the host, and they're able to hopefully add her as co-host so that she can speak if she's been kicked off. So yeah, we do have I think a follow-up question to the Charlotte Shunde. She said, thanks for those ones about not including Whare Wānanga data. It's kind of more of a comment, I'm not sure, but doesn't that mean that some of the kei ako or professors in those tertiary kura might have increased the statistics of Māori professors in universities? So maybe a question. I'm not sure if that's a question or a comment or both.
Well, I think it depends on how you're thinking about it, right? So under the Education Act, wānanga are a completely different institution, and universities. And one of the things we know is that wānanga, for instance, didn't have access to PBRF when it first came through. So legally, they're a different institution. So yes, we have more Māori academics if we include wānanga in that number in the country. But really what I think Tara and I are trying to push is that our universities fundamentally need to change. And so that they need to know and be responsible for the number of Māori and Pacific. There's quite a number of Pacific academics in wānanga. They need to be responsible for that development and for hiring the people who they get lots of money off to do PhDs with.
Thank you. And there are some comments that have come through in case you've missed them that are very nice. So from Jenny, amazing work. Thank you for sharing. I love the way that you are making sure your work reaches a wider audience and it's inspiring. And Taniela Lolo here says, Malo Opito, awesome guys, great talk. There you go. And do we have any further questions? We've just got a few more minutes. If not, we can wrap up a little bit early and have everyone come back at 2 for the next one. So I'll give it 1 minute to, Jenna says that it's very hard to be a pioneer. Thank you for pioneering. And
can anyone hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you, Tara.
Okay. The Zoom just wanted me to say hi. So hi, sorry about my internet.
We have a question from Bailey who says, what do you need from communications people to help spread your kōrero?
I think just amplifying it when we have things come out. You know, we had people when we published our Why Is It My Professor Māori and Pacifica papers that printed out the papers and left them in the office tea room, and lots of other things like that, just to kind of spread the message. I think that's what's really helpful. And also, like what I talked about, it's been really, really helpful for us working with the Science Media Centre, because, you know, when you do a degree or PhD, you don't necessarily get taught anything about how you should communicate your research. So for a lot of people, it's like going into it blind and you don't really know what to do. So helping researchers through that is really awesome. And I think one of the things that we didn't talk about, which we had discussed separately, Sereana, was about how we needed to reflect more about how our communication is done. So like, I hate listening or watching any videos of myself or listening to them. but actually it's really necessary and something that I should do so that the next time I interview that I am constantly improving. I've given a couple of crappy interviews, and we've had baby burps on live radio and other fun things that have happened to us. So yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Sereana, did I cut you off? I was just checking.
Oh no, I was just going to say I agree with Tara. It is about a lot of us. One of the things that I've found quite interesting is that when I've or we work with people that you're quite good at storytelling. I'm like, oh yeah, we grew up in spaces of storytelling, so it's about supporting Māori and Pacific to get their messages out there and to help people to see how their work connects with current events and all those sorts of things that really just help to amplify the message, like Tara was saying, and making us watch our videos so that we know what we could have done better.
Yeah, it looks like we have another question that's come through from Scott. So first of all, he's loving you in your presentation, your mahi, thank you. And he says, have you found that you've had pushback from unexpected sources such as senior Māori or Pacific academics?
Scott, I'm gonna let you off for the hard one since we've known each other for over a decade. I mean, Scott, you work in an institution, you know. The price that has to be paid to sit at the top table is sometimes that we are the institution, not the community. So we respond in ways that protect our institutions. But we haven't had anything from our senior Māori and Pacific. They've all been really supportive of the work that we do. And they help us to navigate what it means to call our institutions racist and still be paid by them. So I do think that there is a genuine sort of engagement from them to support us in the work that we do. Ultimately, it helps their work, which is to address inequity in the universities. So thank you, Scott, for your very sneaky question and political question, and I give you my political answer.
Can I just jump in and add to that, and that every time we publish a paper, our inboxes are full. There's the racists, emailing us, but there's also senior Māori Pacific academics who we may have never connected to, emailing us saying, thank you for this work. This is what we needed. And this speaks directly to my experience of, 50 years in the academy, maybe not 50 years, but, so it's really heartening after we publish papers to sit and to talk to those people who email us. And I would say, it's overwhelmingly positive engagement from senior Māori and Pacific academics.
Thank you. And yeah, we have I think we'll probably just wrap it up. We'll wrap it up here. It looks like we don't have any more questions coming through, so we just have a couple more comments. One from Sophia, just wanted to say thank you for the amazing talk. It's been wonderful to hear about the teamwork. And from Susie Wales, it says, thank you for your incredible talk. It is wonderful to hear from you both about how your amazing collaboration works. And thank you for all you are doing to hold our institutions to account.